All right, well, good evening and welcome to the proceedings of the Grand Rapids Public Schools Board of Education. Today is Monday, February 1st. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll? Ms. Lewis, you're still on mute.
There
we go.
Okay. Dr. Flores?
Present.
Ms. Grant?
Present.
Ms. Lewis is here. Reverend Matias?
Present.
Mr. Ross? Mr.
Present.
Law? Dr. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Davis is excused. President Schottky?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
And Miss Williams is present as well.
Oh, did I? How did I do that? Oh, I see. Yep. Thank you. I won't miss
Thank you,
you
Ms.
again.
Williams. All right, may I have a motion for approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Support.
All right, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. We will begin this evening's agenda with our celebration. So Dr. Roby, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening, President Schottky and members of the board. I would like Chris, our moderator, to bring forward Dr. Maida Gunnell. We'll be celebrating our partnership with Warner Norcross and Judd, who sponsor the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Essay Contest. This year's contest was expanded and included a social justice legacy contest. This year's contest provided students the opportunity to use different forms of expression and to submit their entries in honor of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so I see that Dr. Gunnell is here as well as Ms. Brown, so I will turn it over to them.
Good evening, President Schottky, Dr. Roby, and board members. I would like to invite Mrs. Malika Brown to join me in recognizing the winners of the 16th Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Legacy Contest.
Thank you, Dr. Gunnell, and thank you, Dr. Roby, Ms. Schottky, and the members of the board for this opportunity to publicly celebrate our students. Though we strive to acknowledge the contributions of African Americans all year long, I want to mark that today, the beginning of the nation's observance of Black History Month, is the perfect time to celebrate several sixth graders' acknowledgement of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of social justice. As Dr. Roby said, for 16 years, the law offices of Warner Norcross and Judd have provided a platform for our students to use their voices and to have their thoughts made public. I want to just send a big shout out to our teachers and administrators who have supported our future social justice leaders in this work. And with that said, I'd like to bring forth and introduce Ms. Courtney Failer, who has been my Warner Norcross and Judd counterpart and left arm for the past 4 years in this contest. Courtney will tell you more about this contest and present this year's honorees. And there she is.
I was booted out, but I'm back.
Welcome, Courtney. Thank you. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I echo Malika's sentiments and really appreciate having the opportunity to talk with the board about this contest on behalf of Warner Norcross and Judd. It is one of my favorite things that I do all year, and I know our attorneys really look forward to it. The submissions from the students are just incredible, and it's so refreshing to get a perspective of the youth of today and kind of understand where their mind's at, where their thoughts are, and broadening the contest this year to include all forms of art expression was also really refreshing too, because we were able to then see the strengths of all the students. You know, if somebody's not doesn't excel at writing, but they're really great with their painting expression, we were able to see that. And this year, the variety of submissions really was broad. We had sculpture, we had poem, we had stories, we had paintings, drawings, video. It was really incredible to see. And I want to thank Malika for all of her heavy lifting in collaborating with the teachers on this and getting this new format rolled out, especially in our virtual worlds during COVID. We really picked a good year to revamp everything. I know you all had a lot going on with virtual school, and Malika really helped pull this off. So thank you so much, Malika. I will say that the winners still receive gift cards to Schuler's Books, as we've done in the past. So the top 3 winners will receive gift cards, as well as the additional 11 honorable mentions that we had this year. And with that, I'd like to show a video that we had produced that gives you a little bit more information about this year's contest and features the top 3 winners. So I believe, Malika, you might have that queued up. So thank you again for the opportunity. We really look forward to continuing this relationship and partnership in the future. And again, we're just so grateful for everything that the public schools do for our communities. And looks like the video is up and we're ready to go.
It's important for Warner to hold this contest every year because we're really hoping to encourage more thoughtfulness and more engagement and ultimately more progress towards racial justice. And we really hope that by students learning to think deeply and even critically about the history of injustice in our country, that each generation will become progressively more equitable and more just. And so by holding this contest every year, we're hoping that we're doing our small part towards building the future that we want to see. By expanding the format of submissions to include, music and art and poetry, we hoped, first to make the contest itself more inclusive. And then we hope to give students the opportunity to engage in a way that was really meaningful to them. And we were just blown away by the submissions. And we want to say thank you to Malika Brown and all the hardworking staff and students at GRPS for participating in this year's contest. You've done a phenomenal job and we're so happy to work with you.
What inspired me was the people who have lost their lives due to police brutality. I watched a movie about this man named Oscar Grant. Back in January, it was on the 4th of July, he got into a fight on the train and the police shot him. And I was watching the movie about him and it really shook me up because this could happen to any African American in America. The reason I created the piece in that particular format is because I love expressing myself through art. I love just drawing, sketching, painting, and I really love doing digital drawing because that's something I really enjoy because I can perfect my drawings. It means a lot to me because racism and discrimination is at an all-time high and people are getting killed just because of their skin color or their background. And I think that's just crazy. The message I'm trying to get across is that it's 2021 and everyone just needs to wake up. Like they teach you when you're in the 1st grade or kindergarten, you just need to treat other people how you want to be treated.
Well, my mom, she works with people to talk to adults to try to train them to talk to kids about race. It's a hard thing to do because kids, well, they see their parents as role models, just as I see Martin Luther King as a role model. My mom does this work and it makes me want to do this work to help her and other people out to try to get this message out there. Martin Luther King has inspired me to also do this, to be more like him and to help with the message that he's trying to give. The message that I'm trying to send out is that color matters because it's an important part of your personality. And if kids think that, for one, color doesn't matter, or that their color is like bad, or they want to be just like their friends and they seem like different, then they're not realizing that color is a special part of them. And without it, they wouldn't be them. My essay is titled Talking to Kids About Race. An important part to me is that children are not colorblind. Representation matters. Identity development and racial socialization are important child development tasks. Think about how you are, or would have been, if nobody told you that skin tone is a special part of what makes you, you.
My teacher and Martin Luther King, they inspired me to do it, because at first I didn't really want to do it. I was like nervous and stuff. My teacher encouraged me a lot to do it, told me not to be nervous, and I wrote the poem. It doesn't really matter who you are or like what you look like or anything. I feel like it matters about your personality and how you act around people. Cause I just want everybody to be like kind to each other and happy, and the world like needs to change because there's been a lot of stuff going on. I wanted to get this out to the world so they can know, not just my class or my school, so everybody can know. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Legacy, a poem by Tristan Thompson. Do treat others the way you want to be treated. Do not be ashamed to be African American. Do remember we are all humans at the end of the day. Do not try to be something you are not. Do remember to not discriminate against others. Do not treat anyone like they are different. Do think before you act. Do not take away from someone's happiness. Always be kind. If we all work together, we can succeed together. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Legacy.
And I forgot to mention that this contest did receive statewide recognition this year. Michigan Lawyers Weekly has it as the cover story in this week's publication, with Trinity's piece right up front. It's a really beautiful spread. So if you are able to, please pick up a copy, or I'm happy to email you a PDF. Malika, if you want to share my email address, I'm happy to share that, or you can share the article. But it was really exciting to see all the recognition that we received. Several publications picked it up, but Michigan Lawyers Weekly just came out today, so it's top of mind, and it was really a beautiful spread. So thank you again very much.
And then I'll also add that there's a website, mlksocialjustice.grps.org, where you can go and see all the submissions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you all for the work that it took to put this together. This was amazing, and our kids always blow me away every time I see the work that they do. But this in particular is really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney and Warner, Norcross, and Judd. Thank you for connecting us to our students. It isn't as often as we like these days as we sit here virtually on the Board of Ed. And so it is so important that we hear the voices of our students. Thank you for bringing them to us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. I saw that Malachi Eddie was in the chat too, and viewing. So Malachi, thank you if you're out there. You did an amazing job. Color matters. You're so right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And our other students, if you're on the call, we are so proud of you. So proud to represent you. Okay. Well, from there, we'll move on to our secretary's report this evening. So Ms. Lewis, I will hand it back over to you.
Please check the district's website. Go to Notice of Regular and Special Board Meetings to obtain Zoom virtual meeting access information, or if there will be any changes to doing in-person meetings. Meetings are also noticed and posted outside the district office administration building following the Open Meeting Act requirement. The Academic Achievement Committee will be meeting this Wednesday, February 3rd at 4:30, and these meetings will typically meet the first Wednesday of every month. The Legislative Committee will be meeting on Friday, February 12th at 3 p.m., and these meetings will typically meet the second Friday of the month. The Policy Committee will be meeting on Wednesday, February 17th at 5 p.m., and these meetings will typically meet the third Wednesday of the month. And Finance Committee will be meeting on Monday, February 22nd at 5:30, and these meetings will typically meet the fourth Monday of the month.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis. Next is committee chair updates. We'll start with the Finance Committee, and Ms. Williams, this was your final committee meeting as chair, so please give us an update on the meeting.
Okay, and we had a jam-packed one, so bear with me. I'm going to try to give some of the highlights without getting too far into the weeds, but it was a lot. So we had a 7 mil adjustment in our general fund based on the per pupil adjustment. We did receive property taxes as well. And I should say this, I'm sorry, I am referring to the purchasing agenda, particularly, I'm sorry, to the amendment that is going forward, and particularly to the general fund. So just jumped right in there. We are as well working on the contract with Dean Transportation, since we have a hybrid model that's in place now. So we do need to get the transportation resolved. There is talks as well about the sale of buildings. There is some conversation. ISD would like to purchase some of the buildings that they are currently using as well through the district. So that was a lot for the general fund. Let's see, and then of course there's some new CARES dollars that have come in, and there's been some adjustment to the spend by date for several of them. So that is going to be, I'm sorry, 1 second. We have a little one that has.
We are going to get an update from Mr. Oberst when it comes time to approve the budget amendments. So we can certainly move on for a bit. Yeah, thumbs up. You got it. No problem at all. This is life. All right, so I'm going to take us forward into the Policy Committee update. Ms. Davis is excused this evening, so I'll give just a quick update as I've been able to serve on that committee. We also had a long meeting, but worth every minute, as we have taken our equity policy further into our final draft mode. We will talk about this a little later on in our discussion this evening, but on February 8th at our work session, we intend on, as the Policy Committee, bringing forward that draft to the full board for us to work toward finalization and ultimately move it to the board meeting for an approval of the first and second readings of that policy. But this work is important. This is putting our words into action, which is what we have been talking about for a long time. So that's why we as the Policy Committee feel that the full board input and involvement in the final product is so important so that we can all act together on these statements. So we'll talk about that just a little bit more in our discussion item, but that's what we worked on at the January Policy Committee meeting. All right, last committee update is our ad hoc strategic planning RFP committee. Dr. Baker.
Thank you. Quick update. First of all, we as a district are implementing a planning process for an 8-year plan that would be researched and proposed throughout this year, and that this plan would take us through the next decade, 2030. And so the only update at this time, we will discuss a timeline because it reflects our participation in the board retreat. So I will postpone the discussion on the timeline as it relates to our decisions when it gets time for the board retreat discussion later in this meeting. However, the one date that is very important is that at next Monday's work session, we will discuss the RFP and then vote to authorize the RFP, and it will be going out the next day. So everyone should have the RFP as it's written sent to you, and then also in the board packet. So be prepared. If you have any editorial suggestions, please get them to staff. Send them to either myself or John Helmholt, preferably John Helmholt, and we can discuss any changes and what the RFP should look like and whether or not it's inclusive of what the board thinks it needs. The committee has vetted it and feels confident in the content of it, minus the discussion around the timeline. But if you would like to suggest any changes, please do so by next Monday, because we will vote to finalize it next Monday. And that's all I have at this time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Baker. All right, we'll move on to our superintendent's reports. Dr. Roby.
All right, good evening, President Shockey and members of the board. I will be providing several updates. And I'm just going to give a high-level overview, and then I'm going to turn over a portion of my report to Dr. Gorman. So there's going to be a return to learn planning update, which you'll get from Dr. Gorman. Spring count importance, which is February 10th, 2021. The district's second count day is taking place on Wednesday, February 10th. Due to the COVID environment, the formula will be a little different this year. In years prior, the fall count accounted for 90% of the district's funding, with the spring counting for 10% to be applied to the subsequent school year. For the 2021 school year, a new super blend is being used to determine membership. The 90-10 blend for the 2019-20 school year is multiplied by 0.75 and added to the 90-10 blend for the 2021 year, which is multiplied by 0.25 to determine the super blend used for the 2020 membership. The district will be providing information to our parents and our community to get the word out for attendance. That attendance, of course, matters, and it counts every single day, but it counts on our fall count day as well as our spring count day, and it's critical for funding. Additionally, if students are ill, we ask that you call your child's school so that they are excused, and there are provisions for that in the count process. We want everyone, of course, to be safe. District Virtual School Choice Expo. The Grand Rapids Public School is hosting a virtual school choice expo for all neighborhood and themed schools, and this will take place on Thursday, February 18th from 6 until 7:30. There will be presentations about how to enroll in neighborhood schools, how to apply for themed schools, important information on the different programs and services, along with breakout sessions at every school in our district. The link to the virtual expo will be posted on the district's website at www.grps.org. The virtual expo will also be recorded and available afterwards for families who may not be able to attend on February 18th. In addition to the school expo, every neighborhood and themed school will also host their own virtual open house. And the complete list of virtual house open house times are available on the district website. Theme school application deadline change. So our district is accepting applications for theme school, and due to COVID-19, adjustments have been made for our theme school application deadline, selection criteria for test in schools, and out-of-district testing. The theme school application is available online at apply.grps.org. Round 1 of the application window was open January 4th, and it'll extend until February 26th. Again, round 1 is open currently. It began January 4th, and it is extended until February 26th. Round 2, the application window is from March 19th until April 30th. Test and criteria changes. So there's been some changes from what we've done in years past. Each round of the lottery will apply in the following filters in sequence. Filter 1, students who qualify using the MAP score on both math and reading. Filter 2, students qualifying for MAP scores in either math or reading. And again, due to COVID-19, the impact on testing schedules, students who qualify for MAP test scores from fall 2019, winter 2020 winter 2021, or spring 2021. Out-of-district testing. As in previous school years, out-of-district testing is for students who have not taken the MAP test. They must first complete the theme school application, then schedule MAP testing by contacting Student Services at enrollment@grps.org or calling the phone number, and that's area code 616-819-2150. Again, you can contact Student Services at enrollment@grps.org or call area code 616-819-2150. The testing window for out-of-school districts students is from February 16th through February 26th. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gorman, where he will give an update. Remember, we provide a monthly update on our return to learn plans to make sure that as our plans evolve and change, that the board and our community are familiar with new changes and new things that are taking place. Dr. Gorman.
All right, so President Shockey, board members, Superintendent Roby, tonight is an easy one because we are reconfirming our return to learn plan and we don't have any changes from the last time we presented. So as you're probably aware, we have to submit to the state every single month throughout this period of time that we are reconfirming or that we're changing our model. This time we are reconfirming that we are sticking with our model, which is the AB hybrid model and the 100% virtual model. So of course, cohort A goes on Monday and Tuesday in person. Cohort B goes on Thursday and Friday in person. And then we all work from home on Wednesday. Couple of things to point out. On the website, you will see the extended COVID-19 learning plan. So that was what was submitted to the state in August. The only modification to that plan that I want to point out is the new agreed upon schedule that we worked through with the teachers union. So at the very top line of the tab, you will see the extended COVID-19 plan. And then if you go to the very last tab, which is titled Hybrid Virtual Learning Model 1821, that is the new model for every single level. So the plan is the same. There are only slight modifications with the days of the week and of course some language that surrounds that. Next up, Dr. Roby wanted me to speak about count day procedures. Count day is a little different this year. As you know, count day is Wednesday, February 10. The challenge with Wednesday, February 10 is that all of our students are engaging asynchronously on February 10. So it is very difficult to take attendance when students are engaging asynchronously. So this year we have 2 days for the winter where we need to count our students. The first day is Thursday, February 11, and we will put this out in a communication and on our websites and everything else so folks are well aware of it. But the first day, Thursday, February 11, we will count our students in cohort B and our virtual students, because that's the first day they return to in-person school or virtual school after that Wednesday. So the first count day for us is Thursday, February 11 for cohort B and virtual students. The next date for us is Tuesday, February 16th. This is when we will count our cohort A students, because that's the first day that the cohort A students are in person. Okay, so it's a little different this year. And one thing that we would like to stress for this particular count day and every count day, parents, if your student is going to be absent or if your students are going to be absent, please call your students' building and excuse them on that particular day. If you excuse them, we have 30 days to mark their attendance. If they're not excused, we have a much shorter period of time. And it's a tremendous amount of work that we have to complete in a short period of time. So please send your students to school on Wednesday, February 10. Thursday, February 11. Sorry to confuse everybody. And Tuesday, February 16. Again, February 11 is cohort B and virtual students, and February 16 is cohort A. That was a lot of information. We will put it in writing. We will put it on the website and social media. But thank you for being very sensitive to these matters. During these COVID times, we have some challenges, but we have a very talented team that will help address these challenges. That's all I have, Dr. Roby.
Dr. Gorman? Dr. Gorman?
Yes, Ms. Lewis.
May I ask you a question? Are we following, I assume we are following the state recommendation as far as winter sports and when they will start?
Absolutely, 100%.
That concludes our report for the evening. Are there questions that I can answer? Hearing none, I'll turn it back over to President Shockey.
All right, thank you, Dr. Roby and Dr. Gorman. We will now move on to our action items for this evening. The first is our purchasing agenda. Are there any questions or discussion on the purchasing agenda? All right, hearing none, may I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve the purchasing agenda.
Support.
Support.
Oh, Ms. Lewis, will you call the roll?
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams. Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis is excused. President Shotke?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next we have our 3 adoption of budget amendment ones for the general fund, the special revenue fund, and the debt retirement fund. So I believe we'll invite forward Mr. Oberst. Is that correct, Dr. Roby, to walk us through those? Wonderful. Welcome, Mr. Oberst.
Good evening, President Shotke, Superintendent Dr. Roby, and board members. I was really hoping that Ms. Williams would get through the presentation, would minimize mine, but I guess that didn't happen. So.
Yeah, I was quite convinced she would be briefer than you will be.
I'll try to be a little bit briefer at the board meeting here, but yes, as this time of year, for those who've been on the board for a while, we bring our first amendment for adoption. And then again, there are 3 major funds that you are required by law to approve budgets for. And as we make amendments to those budgets, as circumstances change, we bring those to you. Well, that's the general fund, which is the general operating fund of the district, as you know. Special revenue fund, which used to be primarily our center-based programs, which now belongs to the ISD. But even though there's 3 or 4 individual funds within special revenue, the major fund is our food service, and that's 90% of the activity in the special revenue fund. And then the debt retirement fund, which of course is set up specifically to pay off debt service, interest and principal, and that is funded entirely with property taxes on all properties within the district's bounds. Let me see if I have the ability to share my screen. It looks like I do. Bear with me a minute. I can't seem to find what I am looking for. Well, Craig, are you there?
I believe Chris is our meeting moderator this evening.
What's that?
I believe Chris is our meeting moderator this evening.
Okay, hang on. I got what I. All right, here we go. Apologize. I'm gonna, and again, let me just, we need 3 separate motions to act on the 3 resolutions. I'm gonna go to the 2 simple ones first and just briefly go over those, and we'll spent a little more time with the general fund, a little more involved. What you see in front of you is in your packet. This is the debt retirement fund. As I mentioned, every year, our amendment 1 is generally an adjustment to the property tax number, as you can see here. The amendment column increasing it by $1,225,000. When the budget is adopted back in June, the final equalization reports are not completed yet. Those have the updated assessed values of all the property within the district's boundaries. Once we receive that, then we reconcile the property taxes collected. And this resulted this year in a amendment 1 adjustment to property taxes of $1,225,000, a minor adjustment to investment income. And that is the only adjustment for amendment 1, as is normally the case with the debt retirement fund. Any questions on that simple amendment from anybody? All right, what I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, Ms. Schatke, President Schatke, is to go through these and then we can come back and adopt them individually. Does that work?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Special revenue fund. Again, this is in your packet, just a summary of the impact on fund balance. There is no fund balance requirement for the special revenue fund as there is for the general fund. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of our operations of the special revenues in food service. We have had an excess fund balance in food service for the last, I believe, 3 years. So the federal government, since it's all federal money, they don't allow you to build up a fund balance that exceeds 1 year's worth of expenditures. And if you do, you have to present a spending plan to reduce that, which we've done the last few years, primarily replacing some capital assets, which we can buy out of a food service fund. So this amendment 1 here reduces our fund balance by $2.356 million down to $1.6 million. The significant adjustments here, this is a revenue section right up here. The major decrease in revenue is from the food service revenue of $6.4 million. The reason that is the case is our meal count, because of the pandemic and in-person learning being deferred until recently, is down significantly. August through December of this year, for our breakfast program, we're down 458,000 meals. Our lunch, we're down 923,000 meals as compared to the prior year. So as we serve fewer meals, revenue is appropriately decreased because our costs decrease. So 6.4 million is less federal revenue because of less meals we are serving overall. And as you can see, we have similar decreases on the expense side, the big piece being in purchase services, which are some of our food service contracted employees that are in our buildings, as well as recess monitors. And then food service costs obviously go down almost $3 million. So revenue's down 6.6 million, expenses are down 4.2 million, and that results in the reduced fund balance. The impact, the other special revenue here, the 38,710, that is in the Hausman Field Fund, and that's related to lack of obviously ticket sales, since we could not have any or very few in-person attendance at football games, as well as concession revenue decreases because we could not run concessions. So those are the major adjustments for Amendment 1 on the Special Revenue Fund. Questions there? All right. Then we'll jump up to the General Fund, and I've been talking about this with the board virtually probably since September, when the budget was passed. Understand and recall that the budget was adopted last June. At that time, we thought we were going to have a $650 per student decrease in our foundation allowance. We had been notified at that point of only one major COVID-19 funding. And that was the ESSER 1 funds, about $7.5 million. We had anticipated spending part of that in the 1920 year. So we had moved some of that revenue, recognized some of that revenue in the 1920 year, and the remainder of it here in the 2021 year. We also had anticipated some asset sales. And as you know, we made almost $11 million in cost reductions to try to maintain at least a positive fund balance. So all those, since that point in time, the budget was adopted, obviously things have gotten much better statewide in terms of revenue. There have been a number of different new buckets of COVID-19 related funding, some of which we can use in general operations. The others are our general grant column here. So within the general fund, we have the general operations, this first column here. We have grants, that's both our federal, state, and private grants. So like the XQ, any XQ operations are in this grant column. All the new COVID funding we got, and there are 6 buckets of that so far, more to come, are all in this grant column. And then athletics is just a little carve out that we fund out of the general fund. So quickly here on the revenue side, local sources, much like the debt retirement fund, we true up our property tax collection based on the new equalization reports and the new assessed values. We had in the initial budget $1.7 million of revenue for asset sales. It's not likely at this point, as you know, we're going to embark upon a facility study along with our strategic plan. And it's not likely we're going to sell $1.7 million of property before the end of the year. So we backed that $1 million. We have had interest in some of our empty buildings, and we are going to begin discussions again with the ISD in terms of their interest in acquiring the buildings that we own that they now use, the Beckwith for the adult ed, KEC Oakley, and Straight for special ed, center-based special ed programs. So we're hoping we'll get $700,000 of sales, building sales by the end of the fiscal year. So that's been reduced by $1 million. On this side over here in the grant column, the local sources, XQ grants, some additional dollars that were moved between fiscal years actually. Some Smart Zone additional money we're going to get from there. The WK Kellogg is $300,000. That is a $900,000 grant over 3 years, $300,000 a year, and that's to help fund our summer school programs. We did not know about that back in June. We've been notified of that subsequently and accepted that grant. On the state side, that's where the major revenue increases occur. Here's the $7.1 million increase in the foundation allowance because there were not any cuts. And in fact, there was a $65 per student increase. That's offset by the 850 student loss we experienced in the fall count, although as Superintendent Roby mentioned in her comments, the super blend this year minimized the impact of that lost revenue, but we still about $1 million less revenue because of the student loss in the fall count date. That's $1.7 million MIPSR categorical revenue. That's part of the MIPSR's funding. There are several sources of funding for MIPSRs. The 147A and 147C is essentially dollars that come to the district from the state, and then we turn around and give it right back to them. It's a technique they have to use to get additional money into the MIPSRs to help that underfunding. That was reduced a bit this year from what we were expecting. So that's why there's that big decrease there. In the grant column under state sources, additional amounts in the Great Start Readiness Program. We thought there would be cuts there, as well as reduced placements, which didn't occur. Some additional educator loan grant through KASD. MDS HSS mental health grant, that's to fund our some mental health workers in our middle school. So made some adjustments there. And then on the federal side, all the COVID money primarily came from the Federal CARES Act. It got passed through the state, but that's why all these adjustments in this middle column of grants, and there are a significant number of them, are under federal sources, because these are all sourced through the first CARES Act that was passed back in, I don't remember now, June or something like that, August. The ESSER formula grant, we increased that revenue by $1.7 million. And that was a piece that I'd mentioned back in June. We thought we could recognize some of that in the 1920 year, and in fact did that. Subsequent to that, the MDE changed the rules around recognizing that. It said you could not recognize that revenue until you would actually file the application and got approval, which we had not yet done as of June 30th. So all that simply is we're just switching years. We're taking it out of 1920, and now we're going to recognize it in 2021. So it's not a reduction in the dollars. It's just a change in years where we're recognizing it. Here's the ESSER equity grant, the $1,589,000. That was new after June 30th, again through the state. And here's the big coronavirus relief funds. That was, again, we were not notified of that until after June 30th. That is a $350 per student we are getting from the CARES Act. The Kent County, the $358, same thing, same source. It just came through the county. The $5.4 million initially, and the $358 actually, initially had a December 30th, 2020 deadline to spend. The COVID-19 Relief Act that was signed just after Christmas extended that date until December 30th of this year, of 2021. The state did grant that extension to this $5.4 million. The county commissioners decided not to grant that extension to the $358. So fortunately, we had spent the $358 by December 30th of last year. So that particular grant is closed out now. And then the two ESSER grant, the ESSER formula grant and the ESSER equity grant, initially had a spending deadline of September 30th of this year. That was extended now to September 30th of 2022, which is a good thing. So we've got more time to spend that. So you can see here, all those adjustments totaled almost $10 million. And that was all mostly COVID-19 money that we didn't know about until after the budget was adopted back in June. Total general fund increase in revenue, $17.7 million. On the expenditure side, these are areas where we still have, things are still moving around. We made some adjustments like we normally do with our employee costs. Part of that is we had anticipated no hard cap increase for this year. We in fact have made hard cap increases to all employee groups. We also had some compensation adjustments, which are partially reflected in here, but not all of it because we hadn't settled on everything yet. The grant column, again, I'll remind you, has no impact on fund balance. So whatever revenue the amount we increase revenue by, we will also increase expenditure side. So these big adjustments, $1 million and $4.4 million, are really spending all those grants we just talked about from the coronavirus, ESSER grants, CARES Act grants, et cetera. Total increase in expenditures, we're anticipating $13.5 million. As Ms. Williams alluded to in her comments, there are some expenditures that haven't been reflected yet. We have not yet settled the new contract with Dean Transportation. So we have not made any adjustments to our Dean costs. There likely will be some reductions down. So Amendment 2, which we will probably bring to you in May as we normally do, we'll probably see some more expense adjustments, both up and down. And there will probably be, well, there will be some more revenue adjustments because, again, as Ms. Williams mentioned, there is additional money that will come our way from the new Relief Act that was signed after Christmas. If Lansing works out the differences between the new federal act and some additional state funding, the governor talked about, I think, 2 weeks ago and mentioned it in her state of the state address. There's about $39.1 million in additional funding from additional grant funding that will have a spend date or spend timeline beginning once we get it, which may be within 30 to 60 days, through September 30th of 2023. September 30th of 2023. And that really spans 4 of our fiscal years. So we'll recognize some of that money yet here in 2021, likely, some in 2022, some in 2023, and it goes through the first 3 months of our 2024 fiscal year. So you're likely to see a general fund amendment to probably as significant in terms of dollar amounts, $15 to $20 million as you're seeing here for Amendment 1. So I will take a breath and address any questions any board members might have.
Any
Obviously,
questions?
more positive a scenario as we sit here today than we had when you had back in, we all had back in June when you had to approve that first budget. So things are looking up. And I will also mention, as I did the Finance Committee, for those that are paying attention, the revenue estimating conference that took place on the 15th of January was also very positive in terms of revenue to the state, the remainder of this year and into next fiscal year. So it does not look like we should have a challenging funding from the state, basic funding from the state in terms of foundation allowance for the 21-22 as we sit here now, presuming no other major economic disasters hit between now and end of our fiscal year. So.
Well, that's
Right.
definitely better news than we expected.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The effort and the amount of work that it takes to track on all this is not lost on me. So thank you, Mr. Oberst, to you and your team for keeping us on track moving forward. All right, if there are no other questions or discussion, we can move into our approval of each of the amendments. All right, so let's start with the general fund. May I have a motion for approval of the adoption of Budget Amendment 1?
So moved. So moved.
Support.
Perfect. Here, Dr. Flores and Dr. Baker. All right, Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant, Ms. Grant,
I'm
Ms.
sorry. Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis is excused. President Shockey,
Yes.
motion carries.
May I have a motion for approval of adoption of Budget Amendment 1 Special Revenue Fund?
So moved.
Support.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ross and Ms. Grant. Ms. Lewis, will you please take the roll?
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross, Mr.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Davis is excused, President Shockey,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. And may I have a motion for approval of the adoption of Budget Amendment 1, Debt Retirement Fund?
So moved.
Support.
All right, thank you, Ms. Grant and Mr. Ross. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes, Reverend Matthias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis is excused, President Shockey,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is the approval. Yes, thank you, Mr. Oberst. Next is the approval of the Kent ISD Schools of Choice Resolution. Is there any discussion or questions about this resolution? We are currently opted in. Okay, hearing no discussion, may I have a motion for approval of opting into the Kent ISD Schools of Choice Resolution?
So moved.
Support.
All right, thank you, Dr. Baker and Reverend Matthias. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes, Reverend Matthias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross, Mr. Ross,
Thumbs up. He's a yes.
okay, he's a yes, all right. Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis is excused, President Shockey,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next is the MASB Board of Directors ballot, Region 3, which we are a part of. And so we need to vote on one of the 4 candidates that was provided to us to serve as our representative for the next 2 years on the MASB Board of Directors. All right, is there any discussion or questions about this?
Ms. Shockey,
Yes, Ms. Lewis.
I would like to move that the board support Jill Fennessy from Tri-County. She is the president right now of the Michigan Association of School Districts as far as, but she couldn't get a bye because she had to have one last year. And I'm certainly not going to run against her because she's really wonderful. And many of us have met her. She's been with us in Washington. So I move that we support Jill Fennessy.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lewis. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Ms. Lewis, you may call the roll.
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matthias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis.
Excused.
Oh, absent, that's right. Sorry about that. Ms. Shockey,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis. Next, we have our consent agenda grouping. Are there any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none, may I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you, Mr. Ross and Dr. Flores. Ms. Lewis, please take the roll.
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matthias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis is excused. President Shockey,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis. We have 2 discussion items this evening. The first is just a preparation for our work session next week on Monday, February 8th. So we have some homework, Board of Education. I would like you to be prepared for 2 discussions at that work session. The first is to finalize and approve the RFP for strategic planning services, as Dr. Baker has spelled out in our discussion earlier. So that document will be circulated if it hasn't been already. So please read through that, and we're going to discuss the timeline in just a moment, but be prepared to add, enhance, edit, subtract. We'll do that work together as the full board on the 8th, and then ultimately approve that for distribution beginning on the 9th of February. The second piece of homework for you is that we want to finalize the equity policy as the Board of Education as well. So that draft document came out of the policy committee. Ms. Pitts shared that with the Board of Education on January 25th via email. That's in a Word document form for you. So please take this next week to really carefully go through those policy items and be prepared again to have a full board discussion and move that forward after our work session to approval. Any questions about those two items? Okay. All right, so let's also talk about the board retreat, which is currently scheduled for March 26th. Dr. Baker, is this a good time for us to pull up the timeline?
Yes, and actually, I wonder if either Superintendent Roby or John Helmholt can come forward with the re-proposed timeline. I don't know if that'll be handy.
Sure. Chris, if you can bring Mr. Helmholt in, he has the updated copy and he can share the timeline at that point.
Hey, good evening. Give me just a second here and let me see if I can pull up the document.
While you do that, I'll just explain why we're reconsidering. We had, if you look in your packet, there is a proposed timeline. However, the ad hoc committee met today at 5:30, and we kind of realized that we're kind of squeezing a lot in a short period of time. We would like to go through the process of asking for RFPs, getting them back, reviewing them, and then voting for them, and hiring a firm before spring break. However, we also discussed the possibility of, and kind of the preference that the firm that we hire would be with us for our board retreat as we discuss, going deeper into equity in general, and then also more specifically all of the strategic planning. So that's where we are left now. So if everybody can, does everybody see the screen?
Yes, thank you.
I assume if I can, you can. I'm going to start with this and then have John Helmholt help us if necessary. So as you can see here, today we met. We finalized the RFP as it's going to be presented to you all, and then we will vote on it next Monday. And then immediately the next day, this RFP will go out to the public and in forums where people look for the opportunity to do this work. We would receive the proposals by noon on March 5th. So this is where it gets tight. And so I want people to be sure that they're agreeing to this timeline at this time. So on March 5th, whatever packets the firms send will all be presented to the district by noon. The staff at the district will then get us copies by PDF electronically to us by the end of the day on March 5th. On March 8th, we will choose amongst those firms the people that we would want to interview. So presumably 3 firms we would interview. So what you would be agreeing to essentially is that because of the tight timeline, everyone would spend the weekend reviewing the firm proposals. We would then discuss it at the work session on March 8th, and we would select the firms that we would be wanting to interview. So that does require us spending time with the materials the weekend before. The district would then contact those firms and request that they be prepared to interview with the board in a special work session beginning at 4:30 on March 15th, where we would schedule 3 half-hour interviews with each firm prior to our regularly scheduled 6:30 board meeting. We would, and this gets even tighter, presumably we will be voting on which of the 3 firms that we just interviewed during the regular board meeting. Okay, so I want to stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
I guess a couple questions. I'm wondering for our review of the proposals that the committee consider, and I'm not saying we need one, but I'm wondering if a conversation came up about a rubric or any sort of prioritization guidelines for us as we review them, you know, things that are priorities for us as we review the proposals.
We did discuss that at our initial meeting and decided against it. However, I think because of the time, and you might be correct that we might need to, I think that the committee can work with staff to at least, we don't really want to assign points in a rubric to anything, but we could at least, by using the RFP, and we could discuss this at our work session next week, kind of key items that we want to like focus on to help us kind of organize our thoughts on the 15th. So that's a good suggestion.
And then the next thing, although we have the deadline of March 5th, can we maybe get them as they come in? If we get some that come prior to March 5th, you know, to give us some opportunity to not have the laborious task reviewing them all in the 3-day span. So if some come in early, can we just get those disseminated?
That would be a staff question. Dr. Roby, what do you think?
Sure. I don't necessarily see an issue with it. I think we want to make sure that we're tracking it. So, you know, let's say if some are coming in before the March 5th deadline, and then at the end of the deadline to make sure that everybody has seen, let's say 20 proposals have come in, and just kind of, and we can create a rubric or some sort of schedule so you know these are the proposals that you saw in this state, this state, this state. So you have a way, because I don't want anyone to get lost.
Yeah,
That
maybe. I mean, I'm thinking maybe even as they come in, you can just send them out, but still on March 5th, just send all of
like
them.
a summary. Yep.
Send them
Yep.
all out still, at least, you know, that way. Yeah.
Sure, we can do that. So I know that Mr. Helmholtz is listening, and then of course Julie will help us kind of coordinate that effort. We'll make sure that it happens.
Yeah, and I was just saying, you know, from a staff perspective, I don't think they need to put any extra work in, you know, creating any sort of tracking piece. Just as you get them, send them out. But again, on the 5th, just send them all out. At least that way, you know, everybody has them. And, you know, I don't want anyone to do any unnecessary work for it. Just like to have them as soon as possible. That's all.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions or concerns about being able to follow the timeline up until the March 15th date? Okay, and we, you know, we can reconsider this next week, but it is a tight timeline, and we can't decide on March 8th that we would prefer more time. If we're agreeing now that we're going to do it on March 8th, because we would be asking the firms to be prepared to interview just a week later. The question arose that if we're choosing the firm presumably on March 15th, is it, and we're having the board retreat on March 26th, and the primary guest at that board retreat would be an individual from the firm that we have as yet met. Is it fair to expect that? So we would like to have the firm hired before spring break, but it's not necessary that we have our first meeting with the firm before spring break. And we could in fact have, but this would require postponing the board retreat to a later date. And I just wanted to introduce the idea of this. And I spoke to President Shockey before the meeting. This is really the board's call, along with her and the superintendent. So just wanted to put that out there. Well, Jen, you want to talk about the other topics and why we want to keep them together?
For the board retreat?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure.
I can just give you the rationale that the ad hoc committee discussed. I don't want to overstep my bounds here.
Yeah, no, please.
Is that the two primary topics was going deep and looking at equity and enrollment.
Yeah.
And strategic planning. Dr. Roby and I think all of us agree that those two things go hand in hand, and that to separate them would do a disservice. So we discussed in the ad hoc committee that perhaps we should postpone it in order to keep the two topics together and have them discussed on the same day. So then basically the ad hoc committee, in discussions with the superintendent, are suggesting that we reconsider the date for the board retreat.
All right, thank you, Dr. Baker. I am very open to postponing the board retreat so that we can ensure that the content and our facilitators and strategic planning firm are prepared to walk alongside us in the work. So is there anyone that is opposed to postponing into April after spring break for our first retreat of the year?
This would likely mean that since spring break, if I'm correct, goes from April 5th to the 9th.
Yep.
Or April 2nd to the 9th, or however. So then that first week that would be available would be the week of April 12th. And if we did it on a Friday, the 16th.
Correct. So Dr. Baker, why don't I have Dr. Roby and Julie send out a request to boards just to confirm that the 16th would be a suitable date to postpone. And then once we get those confirmations, we can add that to the project schedule.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Dr. Baker and the ad hoc committee for your work. Really appreciate the progress thus far. It's going to be a big and exciting year. Okay, any questions for Mr. Helmholt before we let him go? Okay.
Thanks, John.
Yep, thank you. All right. We have no public comment this evening, so I will move into superintendent's comments. Dr. Roby.
All right. This is our kickoff, of course, of Black History Month, as was shared earlier. And I have to say that I am just so very proud of the young people who came forward today to share just their passion and their agency around having voice. I'm always inspired by the work that young people, the creativity that they demonstrate, the grit that they demonstrate, and to be so young and to be so poised is always so very impressive. Representation matters, as was stated by one of the young men that presented. And just kudos to our students, kudos to our staff for giving them that platform and building their confidence. A lot of times it's the work behind the scenes of encouraging young people to share their vision, whether it be through artistic expression or prose or poems or just the spoken word. So again, I'm excited about what's going to happen this month and to continue to encourage our young people to use their minds well. That concludes my comments for this evening.
Ms. Shaki,
yes.
In my notes, there were two people who wanted to talk, or did they not? Did they decide not to?
I do not have any public comment this evening.
All right.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Okay, we'll move into board member comments. Mr. Ross, how about you first tonight?
No comment.
All right, thank you. Reverend Matthias.
No comment.
Very good. Ms. Lewis.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate the kids who did so well tonight. And I'd like to thank Maida and Malika, who do so much work in the background getting these things done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Ms. Grant.
No comment.
Right, thank you. Dr. Baker.
I want to give credit where credit is due. I want to thank Larry Oberst, first of all, for, I give him a hard time about his brevity, but I thought he did a very good job tonight. And especially since he found all that money that is coming our way. So I want to thank him for that. And then secondly, I just really want to thank the district leadership. I think that as we have moved through this year of persistent changes. I mean, it was interesting that we were all happy when Dr. Gorman said there's no changes to report tonight and how rare that is to actually have 2 meetings in a row where things stay the same. But I really want to just say out loud, because as people have expressed concerns about these changes, I have been very impressed with the way the district leadership has responded to these concerns. Not always doing exactly what's been raised, but certainly always listening and considering. I think that what makes me feel good about this is that the district is being led in a 2-way conversation instead of a 1-way conversation. And I think that that's really at this level, considering where we're at, the best that we can have for it. And I just really feel proud and want to just point that out to the leadership. Thank you.
Very well said, Dr. Baker. Thank you. Dr. Flores.
Yeah, I'd like to echo those compliments to our staff, our leadership team, but I also want to focus in on the teaching staffs that have gone back and embraced our students, met them one-on-one, in-person learning again. And just to let you know that, as I talk with kids in my neighborhood and in my store interactions every day, I mean, they're just bubbling with joy that they're going back to school. And so a real heartfelt thank you from the community for going back and engaging our kids in class. So I know it's going to be an uphill battle for us to get all vaccinated, but hey, that's our first step toward returning to normalcy. And so I applaud you.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. Ms. Williams.
I would just like to congratulate the young people for their acknowledgement of Dr. King's work, and just remind us all that it is always the right time to do the right time, and we need to follow the leadership of our young people.
All right, thank you, Ms. Williams. That just leaves me, so I will tell you reports from the Shockey household are that schools